Well, hello, political liberals. Welcome. Have I got the native flower garden design for you? So, before I get started with showing you the design, I would like to point out the specs on this garden so that we can be sure it's even something you can do in your yard, right? So, the sun should be either full or partial. The soil is best if it's loam, but if it goes a little bit to clay or a little bit to sand, that is okay. And also, the moisture level in your soil should be medium, but if it's medium wet or medium dry, that will also be okay. All right, so if this works for you, here we go. So, how do you design a native plant garden with liberals in mind? So after thinking about it for a while, I remembered this brain study that was done several years ago now. And unfortunately, I can't remember the details of the study, and I can't even find the study again. So I'm going off of a little bit of a hazy memory, and I'm sorry. If I find the study, though, I will give you a link to it in the video description. And so what they did in this study is they took a decent number of people, and they had those people say whether they are political conservatives or political liberals. So self-identified. And then they put these people in an MRI machine. Now, MRI, fMRI, MRA, I don't remember the details of the machine or the instrument. And I also don't remember when they were in there exactly what they were showing the people or having the people hear, which is very unfortunate. It's an important detail, but I am failing to remember. But what I do remember is the outcome. So political liberals and political conservatives, their brains lit up and got active in different areas of the brain to the same stimulus. So that in and of itself is very cool. Like different parts of our brains are lighting up, whether we're liberal or conservative. And so the part of the brain that was lighting up in the conservative's mind, I will give you a link in the video description to my native garden design for conservatives if you want to know. But right now we are talking about you, sweet liberal, and what was lighting up in the liberals' parts of the brain related to newness, novelty. So like a liking of novelty, uniqueness, new ideas, new learning, new science, new people, that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? An openness to newness and novelty. And this makes sense. It's often liberals who accept new technologies first and like new ideas first. You know what I mean? I know I'm like massively generalizing, but so that kind of makes sense what they were finding with these MRI scans. And so with that in mind, that is the basis on which I have made this garden design. And so, you know, an acceptance of newness and differences, kind of a purity and an openness of thought, listening, learning. Of course, blue, liberals are labeled as blue. And, you know, kind of the idea that we're all Americans, we all belong, and we all support the strength and the beauty of our nation, even though we're all just a bit different. You know what I mean? And every new group of people that comes over here over the years, sort of in acceptance and love of that newness. Do you know what I mean? So this is the garden design. And now around the edges, it looks a little bit more tidy. Like I have specific spots for specific plants. And in the middle, it looks a little bit more messy. And so the idea here is, in the middle, a lot of times in native flower gardens, you decide in your head where you want to put plants. And then over the years, the plants sort of shift where they are, or like their seeds, their offspring sort of shift where they are. you end up with drifts of plants. And so as you look at each letter in the middle, I've tried to create drifts of the plants. And so your eyes can see them in a few places in the middle. And that often is a garden design that works very well for our eyeballs. And I also like it for liberals because it sort of shifts along and moves with newness and new ideas, the liberals, but also these plants shifting to where they work the best. You know what I mean? And so this garden design is big, and I don't have any dimensions on it because you, dear liberal, are going to see, like, if you have a small amount of space, you might only have one plant in each of these spots. If you have a lot of space, you might have many plants. Do you know what I mean? If you have a really small space, I mean, you can cut off the left half of this, cut off half the top. I mean, you can really shift this garden design around for your needs. Okay, so we're going to start with the first letter of the alphabet. And so in the front of the garden are the shorter plants, and then as you move back, they get taller, because that does make sense. Okay, so A, down there at the bottom, that nice light pink, is Spring Beauty. So Spring Beauty is a plant that's going to come up pretty early. It'll probably be one of your first plants to come up in the springtime. And they tend to attract many different pollinators. And so I thought of this in regards to liberals. And actually, let's bring in letter B too. So letter B there in green right behind Spring Beauty are Dutchman's Breeches. So that's a very cool looking plant. And that is a white. And so with that white, and also the pink of the Spring Beauties, both of these plants have a very light and what I would call pure color. They're very beautiful. And so I sort of think of liberals in this way, a certain purity and openness of thought. And so anyways, but also Dutchman's Breeches and Spring Beauty both can bring in a lot of pollinators. And when I think of political liberals and this study that was done, you know, the idea is sort of bringing another chair to the table, bringing more people in. So these plants are busy with pollinators, and it's like, yeah, get in here. As long as you can get in here and get to work, we're all good. You know what I mean? So new people bringing another chair to the table. That's what I thought about the number of pollinators that Spring Beauty and Dutchman's Breeches both kind of bring to the table. So I have them in the front of this garden in sort of a, you can kind of just see them drifted in there in the front, right? And so you can put them in there any way you want, but both plants will spread a little bit, not aggressively, but they'll spread a little bit and use up the space as needed. Okay, so that's A, Spring Beauty, and B, Dutchman's Breeches. So now we're going to go to the sides. On each side, letter C. And so the lettering is going through when these should bloom. So C should bloom next, and C is Amsonia tabernaemontana. And so this plant will bloom somewhere in the ballpark of April to June, and it is this very nice light blue. It's very pretty, and so blue is the color we give to liberals, so that is fitting. And also it is very stable and will keep coming back year after year after year. And so when I think of liberals, I think that there is, and I don't know how to express this other than to say stability through change. So liberals like to bring in new ideas, new people, new foods, new traditions, and there's sort of a stability in our country through new people coming in and new ideas. What's that quote? Is it Winston Churchill? I might be making that up. Nothing endures but change, which is a beautiful quote. And so I sort of think of that when I think of political liberals and this Amsonia tabernaemontana, this eastern bluestar, being very stable. It will really come back every year in a stable way. Okay, so next plant that will come up is letter D. So this is sort of in the middle back of the garden. I have 3 of them there. yellow and green. And so letter D is Blue Ridge buckbean. I like to say that, Blue Ridge buckbean. So this blooms May through June. It's a beautiful yellow, beautiful yellow. And so Blue Ridge buckbean has this really deep tap root. Once it gets established, it puts down a really deep root, which is great. It makes it very stable. But it reminds me of liberals in new science, new ideas, and that creating stability over time. Do you know what I mean? And if you think I'm out of my mind, you can leave a comment. I do appreciate knowing what people think. Okay, so the next plant to come up all the way in the back is E. And I don't mean to come up, next plant to bloom. And so somewhere June to September, E will bloom. And E is compass plant. So a compass plant can get to be up to 15 feet tall. Like, that's really tall. That's really tall. And what I like about it, excuse me, is that the height of that plant, and it's got a beautiful flower on it too. It's very bold and not afraid of newness, not afraid of speaking out, not afraid to lead to new frontiers. Do you know what I mean? And it's called compass plant because the blooms on it face north and south. They're like north and south facing. And so early settlers and you now can look at it and know, it's like a compass, know what direction north and south are based on which way those flowers are facing. Now, I don't have compass plant in my yard, and I have read people saying, well, it doesn't always properly face north and south. It can change a little bit. So a sort of compass. But that idea for a compass plant of leading us, to new frontiers and new areas and new ways of doing things, Bold, don't be afraid. Okay, so the next plant is going to be F. So F is this bright orange you have towards the front of the garden. And so F is butterfly bush. And so butterfly bush is a type of milkweed. And so in the middle, with the exception of that Blue Ridge buckbean, in the middle I have 4 different kinds of milkweed. Now that seems like a lot, but bear with me. And so when I think of all of these milkweeds, the reason I have them in this liberal garden is, first of all these milkweeds look a little bit different, right? They have different colored blooms. And I think about how we all as Americans look different. We have different countries of origin, usually a mixture of countries of origin. I mean, how many people do you know that are 100% Spanish or 100% whatever? Not that many. We're very mixed. And so I like that with all the milkweeds here in the middle. It's a mix of milkweeds. And so, we as Americans, we all belong here. We support and give strength, and there's beauty to our nation, even though we're all a little bit different. So there's the different colored blooms, but these are all milkweeds, like we are all Americans. Do you know what I mean? And so milkweeds are the only plant that monarch butterflies will lay eggs on. Now that is really important because our monarch butterflies have been in decline, and it's extra sad because monarch butterflies to me are almost a symbol of North America. I mean, you only find them in North America, and they have this huge, super cool migration pattern. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. And milkweeds are the only plant that monarch butterflies will lay eggs on. And so milkweeds are also the only leaves that monarch caterpillars will eat. And you want them to eat your milkweed leaves. You want to see holes in your leaves. You want to be like, yes, monarch butterfly caterpillars have been here chewing. Awesome. Because after they're caterpillars, they make their little cocoon, and then they come out and they're those beautiful monarch butterflies, right? So holes in your leaves are good news. Okay, And so after butterfly bush, which is a milkweed, which blooms June to August, we move to G. So G is a little bit further back there. Another milkweed. G is swamp milkweed. And now it's sort of a misnomer. You don't need to live in a swamp for swamp milkweed. Not at all. I don't live in a swamp, and I have swamp milkweed in our yard. And that also blooms from June to August. It's very pretty. It's got a very bright pink flower that is beautiful. And if you get in there and smell it, it has a very, one person told me they thought it smelled like vanilla. It kind of does smell like vanilla. It's sort of a sweet smell. It's very nice. And it has a lot of pollinators that come to it. The milkweeds usually, but especially swamp milkweed, are very filled with different pollinators. So it's beautiful to watch. And just like I was saying, all these different milkweeds remind me of like all of us different Americans being a little different, but all being American. I think sometimes of like swamp milkweed as being a milkweed, but it brings in all these different pollinators. Like we have all of these different, like we're all from immigrants at one time or another, right? And so I think that is a really beautiful, unique part of our country that I think swamp milkweed encapsulates. And so below swamp milkweed is H, and I've given this a very cool color to it with my crayons. So H is purple milkweed. So this will bloom from June to July. Now, purple milkweed, growing it from seed and getting it through its first year, most people have good luck with. But after that, getting it to come back, so because in its first year it won't bloom, but getting it to come back in its second year and actually give you a bloom can be a little bit difficult. So I will encourage you for purple milkweed. A, it's beautiful, you want to do it. But B, spend a decent amount of time looking it up so that you can make sure your garden is just right for it. Because it seems like when the conditions are just right, that is when she will come back and give you a bloom, right? But it's worth it. Purple milkweed is super beautiful. And again, speaks to the uniqueness of like all these milkweeds in the central area of our garden, the uniqueness of our country, and just the multitude of different people that are here. And it's really the only country in the world that is quite like that. Most other countries are a bit more homogenous in what the people look like. And we don't have that. I mean, we have people that look so many different ways here, and have different traditions and different ways of dressing and different music. It is so unique. Am I impressing upon you how unique I think our country is? Okay. So after H, a little bit below H and to the right, I have I. Wait, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Yes, that's right, I. So I is the last milkweed I have here. And I is Sullivan's milkweed. Okay, so a little less common, or you hear less about Sullivan's milkweed. So it'll bloom from June to August. And I have it in this garden for the same reason I have all the other milkweeds for a liberal. And the look of it, it's very similar to common milkweed, but it's less aggressive. So if you are familiar with common milkweed, it's lovely, but it can be really aggressive. And I didn't want to put something super aggressive in this garden, so I went with Sullivan's milkweed because it looks a lot like common milkweed, but it won't completely take over. Do you know what I mean? Okay. Pardon me. All right. So after H-I, J will be next. So J is all the way in the front of your garden down there at the bottom, and that is purple prairie clover. So purple prairie clover will bloom from July to September, and it tends to bring in a number of pollinators. And so for liberals, this reminded me of kind of like the other plants that bring in a lot of pollinators, sort of liberals tending to be welcoming of new people, bring another chair to the table, get on over here. And so all the pollinators that will come to purple prairie clover. On top of that, purple prairie clover is a very, very favorite plant of the rusty-patched bumblebee. So the rusty-patched bumblebee is endangered. which is super bad news. But the purple prairie clover, I have a hard time saying that, purple prairie clover, is a favorite of the rusty-patched bumblebee. So having that in your garden helps support this bee that is definitely endangered. And when I think about political liberals, I think about how they tend to like to preserve and conserve native things in our country, kind of recognizing that although we are a country mostly of immigrants who have come here and are making this their home and our home, there's also a respect that liberals tend to have for things that have been here before we got here, native things like native plants, right? And so the rusty-patched bumblebee is one of those. It's a native bee that belongs here, and we have driven it a bit to being endangered. And so putting purple prairie clover in your garden can help support that bee if it is anywhere in your region. So the rusty-patched bumblebee is a bit of a Midwestern bee. And by Midwestern, I'm thinking the Michigan area, maybe Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, maybe a little Wisconsin. The range of it, like so many organisms, is shifting a little bit. But if you're anywhere in that ballpark, purple prairie clover is particularly good for that bee. Okay, H-I-J-K. So K is on the outsides, yellow. So K is shrubby St. John's wort. So this is a plant that holds a special place in my heart, because I learned that growing it from seed, getting it to be, it's a shrub, it's like a bush, getting it to be a full-grown, delightful bush can take at least 5 years. And I remember taking it on and being like, I can do this. I've got patience. I can take 5 years and grow this baby from seed. And it's been a few years, not yet 5. And I do have 2 nicely growing shrubby St. John's wort bushes. And so I'm very proud. And so why do I have that in here for you, dear liberal? Well, for starters, it is hardy in many conditions. It's a very versatile plant. And I find that liberals being open-minded, accepting of new ideas, new people, new ways of doing things, this makes for a very versatile group of people, right? Very adaptable, like the shrubby St. John's wort. And also, I know I keep saying this, but shrubby St. John's wort also has a lot of pollinators that come to visit it. It's a generalist plant, so lots of different types of bees and pollinators like to come. And so again, I think of liberals tend to be very welcoming of lots of new people. Come to the table. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Let's all get to work. Just like those bees are all busy on that shrubby St. John's wort. So that is why I thought that might be a nice plant for this garden. Okay, so next up is L. So L is all the way in the back. So E was compass plant, if you remember. L is cup plant. So cup plant can also get really tall. And I have them sort of interspersed along the back. So if you're trying to cut down on the number of plants in this garden, you could pick between compass plant or cup plant. But here I have cup plant for you. And so the idea behind cup plant is just like compass plant, it is a very lovely yellow color. And so with this yellow color, I think of liberals appreciating where our country has come from and looking forward to where it's going. And so in an appreciation of where we've come from, I think of we were built on farmers originally, going out west, spreading west. Once we started getting new territories, farmers really started using the land and growing crops that could feed a growing nation. And if you've ever been into Washington, D.C., the Capitol building where the Senate and the House of Representatives do their work, if you've ever gone on a tour there, they have different detailing work, like in the inside of the building, that has like corn cobs on it, if I remember. And it's to speak to how much farming is important to the base of our country. Do you know what I mean? The formation of our country. They're very important in the halls of Congress. And so part of the yellow in the back there is kind of speaking to an appreciation of where we've come from. But then also the cup plant. So it's tall and big like compass plant. And so with that tallness and bigness, it's sort of not being afraid of a big plant, not being afraid of change, saying new ideas, thinking of new ideas. And then also along the stem of a cup plant, why they call it cup plant is that where the leaves come out, they're sort of connected to the stem in such a way that they make like little cups in these little leaves. And there's a couple different ideas about why those cups are there. But one of the ideas, and I have actually seen this in person, I inhaled so quickly when I saw it. I was like, I started coughing, and everyone's like, what is going on? And that is because I saw a bird come in and take a drink from a cup of a cup plant, and it blew my mind. But I kind of thought of like liberals drinking in new ideas and drinking in new technologies. And as birds come and drink from cup plants, you know what I mean? So that's why I thought cup plant was also kind of a neat plant for this political liberal garden design. Okay, so next up is M. So M is all the way in the front on the left and right. And it's this, I think it's overlooked way too often. It's a very, very beautiful plant. I wish more people had it. It's bottle gentian. Is how I pronounce it anyways. And so this will bloom from August to October. So we're moving later into the year, right? And so along the front there, that spring beauty, the Dutchman's breeches, those will all be gone at this point. You'll probably have some foliage left from the purple prairie clover. And now you have another bloom coming up in the front, which is your bottle gentian. And so bottle gentian is slow growing. So if you're growing it from seed, it's not like in your first year you're going to have this great flower. It grows slow, but it's long-lived. And I sort of like this for liberals for a couple reasons. So one, sometimes people think that liberals accept every new idea that comes along. And it's like, no, not every new idea. Sometimes there's slow acceptance of an idea, sort of a slow, like, okay, let me think about it. And then when an idea is accepted, it's long-lived because a liberal has thought about it good and hard before just accepting it. So that reminded me of bottle gentian, a little slow to get going, but then it's really long-lived once you have it. And then the other thing that reminded me of liberals is that, so this bottle gentian flower is super, super, super unique, right? It's sort of closed, like a closed bottle, which is why they call it bottle gentian. And I think about how, although liberals, like any political group, can be loud and expressing their opinion, I think liberals often also know how to keep quiet and listen. They listen to new ideas, they listen to old ideas, and they try to put this together in their minds to figure out what makes sense. And so bottle gentian being a closed flower, I think of liberals keeping their mouths closed sometimes and listening, right? We all could use to listen more, right? Okay, so moving on to the last plant I have here, along the left and right in the back, letter N, is little blue stem. Now, I apologize if in the background you can hear a ruckus. That is just what's happening in my home right now. Anyways, so I chose little blue stem as the last plant in this garden. So it is actually a grass, and grasses are really important to native plantings. When people get really deep into native plants and really understand them, usually you can find grasses in their gardens because they get it when it comes to the importance of the grasses. So why I picked this for you, dear liberal, is for starters, little blue stem, as it ages, like over the course of a season, it leans blue. And so liberals, we've given liberals the color of blue. So that works. I actually see a number of colors in there. I think it's a very beautiful, as it as it moves through the season. So that blue is the first reason. But the second reason is, sometimes it's hard to tell the importance of grasses for pollinators and insects, but they're really, really important. And this reminds me of liberals because liberals pay attention to science a lot and like to think about it and move forward, even in their garden designs, right? Thinking about science. And so grasses, though often overlooked, even by me, because, they're boring. A lot of insects and small creatures use grasses for protection, for cover, to help with overwintering. They also, a lot of insects use grasses as a host plant. So like they might lay eggs on grasses and their insect babies will eat the grasses. So as always, when you see holes in the leaves of your plants, that's very good news. That means insects and pollinators and caterpillars are using your plants to grow and live. So you're creating a really thriving ecosystem. And liberals tend to get into learning new things and new science and sort of accepting science and new ideas and even spreading them. That's part of liberals being very open in their thought. You know what I mean? And so I thought little blue stem was very fitting then for a liberal-minded native garden plan. And so when you look at this garden then as a whole, like I said, there's a ton of plants here. And so, I got 4 different milkweeds in the middle. You can cut that in half or just pick one of them that you like. And up the sides, I've got, a mirror image on each side. And if you don't have that space, you can lop off one of the sides. And then along the back there, I've got 2 different plants to grow up in the back. But if that's too much for you, you can make it one. You know what I mean? So, of course, make this garden work for you. You know how to do that. And so, dear political liberal, I am telling you something I'm sure you already know, but every 2 years when we have an election, don't forget to vote. Look up all the candidates, read all their answers to questions, listen to them talk, see what they have to say, see which of them matches the most with what you think is best for our country, and vote. Always vote. Don't forget to vote. Also, don't forget to plant native.